It's an article of faith in Massachusetts that the public has a right to use the state's waterways. Nearly 400 years ago, the state's colonial ordinances embraced the idea that, quote, the sea and the shore belong not to any one person, but rather to the public at large. But now that principle and the law that protects it are being tested by development in Boston's waterfront. Adam Riley reports from the Harbor Walk.
Boston's Harbor Walk is meant to be a companion to the Common and the Public Garden, a shared civic space where people of all stripes can gather or seek solitude. But it doesn't always work that way.
This area that now has a bar and some restaurant seating was supposed to be a pedestrian plaza.
Deanna Moran is an advocate with Boston's Conservation Law Foundation, and she's talking about a piece of land owned by the Lux Intercontinental Boston. Under the Massachusetts Public Waterfront Act, or Chapter 91, it's supposed to be open to the public because it borders a waterway. And technically it is, though you might not get that impression.
If you come down here and you try and sit down and you don't go through the maitre d', either, they try and kick you out, and if you fight back, then they let you stay, or they'll just kind of give you weird looks and hope you leave. For people who don't know that this is public space, which is most everyone, you just keep walking.
What's more, on a recent weekday, that space was actually blocked off for a private event by a huge white tent. To do that, the Intercontinental was supposed to get permission from the State Department of Environmental Protection, which enforces Chapter 91. But it didn't.
DEP did not authorize them to have a private event here.
DEP actually cited the Intercontinental in July for posting signs to keep the public out and running a bar and restaurant that restrict pedestrian access. But when it comes to noncompliance, the Intercontinental isn't alone. Recently, the Institute of Contemporary Art shut down another section of the Harbor Walk outright, which is never permitted. And some say there's another problem dogging the Harbor Walk: interior spaces that are meant for the public that have little, if any, value.
We're at Independence Wharf, and this is a Chapter 91 public space, but it's almost impossible to find. No one knows it's here.
Steve Hollinger is a longtime Fort Point resident who keeps close tabs on local development. He says there are rooms like this all over the waterfront, simultaneously unknown and uninspiring.
This is not far afield of what typically happens when you have developers allowed to just check off the boxes and say, we're going to do a visitor center, we're going to do an information panel, and this is what you end up with.
What would be better here?
Theater rehearsal spaces, music rehearsal spaces, what you find on waterfronts when you travel around the world.
That vision might never come to pass, but a crackdown on private parties using public space could be in the works.
That concerns us greatly, and to the extent that we can play a role in preventing that, we're certainly eager to do that.
Brian Golden heads the Boston Planning and Development Agency. He says conversations are underway right now about how the city could help the state enforce Chapter 91. But Golden also says that, by and large, the Harbor Walk is already working the way it should.
You can walk from Rose Wharf all the way along the downtown waterfront over into the Charlestown Navy Yard without interruption. You saw humanity flock to the water's edge just a couple weeks ago for Sail Boston, so that's what we're about.
And clearly, parts of the Harbor Walk are thriving, like this stretch on Atlantic Wharf.
There was a music group from Berkeley playing here that Atlantic Wharf invited over to play. They just closed up about a half hour ago. They're not only creating a public space, they're creating a reliably public destination.
Now, Hollinger says he'd like to see everyone on the Harbor Walk do the same thing. Adam Riley, WGBH News.
By the way, that citation from the state said Intercontinental Boston had to, quote, remove all restaurant and bar seating and any other gates, movable landscaping, or other devices that restrict pedestrian access. Let us know if you see any obstacles.